At the beginning of October, No. 14 Squadron, equipped with Fokker fighters and old liaison aircraft, was deployed in this sector. The squadron's mission was reconnaissance and ground attack in the rear of Soviet forces and to render the vast unoccupied wilds safer for Finnish troops. At the beginning of 1942, the first fighter aircraft of Western origin acquired by the Soviet Air Force appeared in the skies above Lake Ruukajärvi. At the same time, Finnish air defence was strengthened by a flight of Brewsters. Brewster and Fokker pilots scored dozens of kills in air engagements in the Ruukajärvi area. By the end of 1941, the Finnish army had attached its strategic objectives on 3 isthmuses, but the final result of the war would depend upon Germany's success. The Russian winter had ground the German offensive to a halt in front of Moscow and Leningrad. Despite German pressure, Finland stuck to her own objectives and held the defensive position she had already taken while awaiting the outcome of the Great Powers' War. On the Finnish front, a phase of trench warfare began, which was to last 2.5 years until June 1944. The most remarkable operation at this time was the recapture of the Hanko area and the island of Suursaari in the Gulf of Finland. Hanko was operationally assigned to 6th Squadron, subordinated to the Commander-in-Chief of the Navy and 3 Air Regiment. Flying units were reinforced by Curtiss fighters for the battles of Hanko. Towards the end of the year, a Fiat Squadron was included in the regiment, and its aircraft participated in the defence of Helsinki. With the Germans advancing to the south of the Gulf of Finland, the Russians evacuated the Hanko Peninsula at the end of December 1941 and withdrew their troops also from the island of Suursaari, only to retake it again a month later. In March 1942, Combat Group Pajari was formed on the orders of the Supreme Commander and recaptured the strategically important island of Suursaari. The capture of this island, which dominated the eastern end of the Gulf of Finland, made it possible to effectively close the Gulf with coastal defences and naval forces. Combat Group Pajari's attack was supported by more than 60 aircraft. Although bad weather interfered with flying operations at the start of the attack, Finnish bombing inflicted considerable losses on the Soviet troops. In the spring of 1942, the Russians put Finnish defences to the test by mounting several offensives. But these Soviet attacks were repelled. Bad weather hampered fighter activities on the Eastern Front. However, efforts were always made to mount reconnaissance missions behind the lines in support of ground forces. In the early spring, air activity was quiet and the days were passed on monotonous standby duty and various other pastimes. In active periods, transfers from base to base, as well as the severe living conditions, strained the Air Force's technical personnel in particular. Aircraft maintenance had to be carried out in very poor conditions. Various ingenious devices were invented to improve the reliability of the aircraft. Air engagements and routine flying caused plenty of damage to aircraft, and this was in addition to the periodic overhauls which still had to be done despite the war. Major repairs were undertaken at field air depots. Additionally, transporting fuel and supplies, as well as maintenance of airfields and bases on the ice, put a great strain on Air Force ground staff. In the spring of 1942, a major change was made to the Air Force organization. In addition to the bomber regiment, 4 air regiments consisting of fighter and liaison squadrons were formed, with responsibility for the following operational areas. 1st Air Regiment, the Isthmus of Aunus. 2nd Air Regiment, Lake Arnisjärvi and the Isthmus of Marselka. 3rd Air Regiment, the Eastern Gulf of Finland and the Karelian Isthmus. The 5th Air Regiment, formed later, was responsible for the airspace of southern Finland. In 1942, fighter aircraft were found to be obsolescent, whereas newer and faster fighters that the Finnish Air Force received in 1942 were insufficient to replace losses in either quality or quantity. The number of Finnish Air Force bombers nearly doubled in the first year of trench warfare. Number 46 Squadron was equipped with 15 Dornier bombers received as a gift from Germany. Soviet DB bombers reconditioned in the State Aircraft Factory and PE-2 bombers acquired later were allocated to 48 Squadron. At the beginning of 1942, bomber missions were little more than reconnaissance of Soviet rear activities in East Karelia and the interception of Soviet advances in the area of the River Svea. In the spring of 1942, 4 Air Regiment began experimenting with combined attacks by several squadrons against vital Soviet targets in East Karelia. Segetsa Air Base near the Murmansk railway line was bombed in a joint operation involving 21 aircraft with good results.